By the late 1800s, Washington was the timber capital of the world. While California had the massive sequoias, Washington had the Douglas fir and western red cedar, trees so dense and tall they turned the Pacific Northwest into an industrial gold mine. Logging here wasn't just a job, it was an engineering war against the terrain. From the bull teams of the muddy 1880s to the steam-powered donkey engines of the 1900s, the goal was simple. Get these multi-ton giants out of the rain-soaked mountains and into the Puget Sound as fast as possible. The sheer size of the virgin timber in the Pacific Northwest is hard for the modern mind to grasp. These trees were the skyscrapers of the 19th century. A single log section could stand higher than a grown man and provide enough lumber to build several homes. But in a landscape defined by steep ridges and constant rain, the struggle wasn't just cutting them down, it was moving them. In the early days, before the roar of engines, it was a game of physics and raw muscle. Loggers used tools like the peavey, a heavy wooden lever with a metal spike and a hinged hook. With enough men and the right leverage, they could manually roll bolts, or logs that weighed several tons. But for longer hauls, they needed more than human strength. They had the so-called bull team. Massive teams of oxen were the primary engines of the forest. To prevent the logs from digging into the soft earth, loggers built skid roads, essentially a track made of small logs buried crosswise in the mud. To make it work, a skid greaser would run ahead of the team, slapping animal fat or oil on the wood to keep the friction from stopping the team dead. The arrival of the donkey engine in the late 1800s signaled the end of the animal era. This was a steam-powered winch on a wooden sled. It used a system of steel cables and pulleys to yard logs across valleys and into the water. It was incredibly fast, but it turned the forest into a high-tension danger zone. If a steel cable snapped under the weight of a 10-ton log, it became a razor-sharp whip that could slice through anything in its path. Once the logs reached the landing, the logistics became even more complex. Using a gin pole, a temporary crane made from a standing tree, crews would hoist these massive weights onto specialized rail cars. This required a delicate touch. A log dropping off-center could crush a railroad car or derail an entire train. To transport the wood out of the deep mountains, logging companies built their own private rail networks. They used geared locomotives like the Shay. These weren't designed for speed. They were built for pure torque, allowing them to climb steep, uneven tracks that would stall a standard engine. On these lines, a single log often took up an entire car. Behind the machinery were the men who lived in temporary, isolated pop-up cities. These camps were built where the timber was thickest and moved as soon as it was gone. Living conditions were notoriously primitive. In the bunkhouses, or crumb castles, men slept in cramped quarters that smelled of wet wool and wood smoke. Because loggers burned up to 9,000 calories a day, the camp cook was the most vital person on the payroll. By the early 20th century, the industry reached peak efficiency. Camps became fully mobile car camps, where entire buildings were mounted on rail trucks, allowing a company to move its entire workforce to a new forest in a single afternoon. This industrial power transformed Washington into a global leader in lumber, but it forever changed the landscape of the Pacific Northwest. Thank you for watching, and if you are interested in real archive images and the history behind them, leave a like and subscribe.